All right. In this episode of the Here to Evolve podcast, we have a special guest, Tatum Brandt of Brandt Creative, going to lead the way here. So you know what? Let's just start with a quick little intro. Who are you? What are you doing? Why did you get into this? And you don't have to answer those all at once, but give your elevator pitch to kick off the episode.
Okay, elevator pitch. I love it. So I'm Tatum Brandt. Brandt Creative is a creative agency specializing in branding and web design, specifically for the broader wellness industry and the fitness industry. So I'm happy to be here and talk all things fitness and branding. We've been at it since 2019.
I love it. And this has been one of the most fun areas that we've gotten into. Like there's so much that goes into building a business, obviously. And, a lot of it is monotonous. A lot of it is very mechanical and like systematic.
Yeah.
This has been one of the most fun parts to kind of go through this rebrand. So for those of you who don't know, we are using Tatum's company to do a full relaunch, rebrand, marketing strategy, kind of the tone of voice on top of the visuals and the website and everything like that. And just without even, going into the receivables, just the process in the psychology of understanding why you're doing certain things, from colors down to tone of voice, like we were talking about before. It's a much more enjoyable part of the process, I think. And then kind of shifting that into specific areas of content, whether it's the podcast, whether it's emails, whether it's just the website, and, different things, the same messages living in different areas in slightly different ways to kind of captivate the audience in that area. It's just been a really cool part to kind of reinvigorate where we're going with all this.
Yeah, it's so funny. I find a lot of entrepreneurs are highly creative, and you may not think you're creative, especially if you work in a more science-backed space, but you're so creative in the way that you do business and the way you've built your business. So you're not the first person. Most clients love this process. And so we try to get really educational with it as we dig into the why behind choosing certain fonts and colors. So, here's why we use this, here's why it's important. And if you ever want to go about changing it in the future, you kind of know the right steps to take.
No doubt. And, you talk about fonts and colors, but just as far as you'd be very surprised, we did this exercise before you came on with FCPA and did that module. How few people really could answer in a sentence or two, or if you give them 15 seconds, what exactly you do. Who are you? What do you do? Who do you help? How do you solve the
Yes.
problem? The one-liner. So it can be,
Yep.
more than a sentence, but everyone stared at me. The first time I asked that question, they just kind of stared and was like, well, I coach and I help mostly women. And I'm like, well, how do you do it? And
Yep.
who's your ideal person? And if you don't know that, if you can't clarify in that one, quick 5, 6, 7 second pitch, your audience has no idea what you're talking about or who you're talking to or how you're solving that problem.
That's absolutely true. I refer to that as the curse of intelligence. You are so deeply into your business, you understand your methodology and who you serve. So sometimes it's hard to communicate that in a very succinct way that is actually appealing to your clients and conveys your personality in just one sentence. I find people are either really good at telling their story and conveying personality, or really good at the strategy part of things. I serve millennial women and help them lose weight in 40 days, whatever that thing
Mhm.
is, which it has nothing to grab onto. The magic is with that combination.
And it's funny, you can say the same thing, but if you're not saying it the same way, you're still losing that audience. So obviously, that might be a little confusing because you can say the same thing different ways. But if you don't have that one piece that you circle back to, and it's consistently, I help
Yep.
this person do this by doing this, and then obviously building different messages around that, going back and kind of listening to yourself say that back or following along with anybody else on social media, you get confused. You get lost in the noise. You're not really sure what they're doing. And we didn't realize that until, this past year before we jumped on with you guys. That's why we wanted to really simplify the site. Again, saying just 5-degree difference across the board. You weren't really sure what you were coming to us for. So this landing page of a site should be the central hub that just clarifies it all. If you want this, you go here. If you want this, you go there.
Yeah.
But you get lost in the noise. And if there's too much on there, it's just like, okay, well, now I'm tired of reading this. I'm burning too many
Yeah.
calories trying to process this and I'm out. You lose the sale.
I think there's a level of sophistication with business owners. You understand the importance of having consistent fonts, a logo, a consistent brand presence. And so often when people come to us to work with us, it's through that lens. Like, I want my stuff to look really good. And you tend to forget about words are so powerful. And I think that's just as important, if not more so, than the visual piece. The visual piece is built on the back of your personality, your market position. And those are things that it's not as shiny and sexy. So you're not as attracted to it. And so that's always fun to say, okay, yeah, we're going to give you a really killer visual identity, but let's start all the way back at the beginning.
Yeah, it's like the kind of what people are thinking subconsciously, right? So you're attracted to this sexy thing, but if there's nothing relatable to that, if there's nothing pulling you in beyond that, and that's kind of as you're going through it, you're deciding that subconsciously. If you don't have that draw, then it doesn't matter what that shiny piece looked like.
Absolutely. Do we want to dig into what a brand actually is? Because I feel like that definition, getting that squared away right away, could potentially be helpful.
Take it.
Okay. Yeah, I think when it comes to defining a brand, obviously, I think we've all seen posts that are your brand is more than just your logo. We're typically pretty aware of that. And we've even dove a little bit deeper in this conversation. Your brand is more than just your visual identity and how you show up visually. It is also your verbal identity and their strategy behind who you are and what you do. But the funny thing is, a lot of even designers don't have a consistent definition for what a brand is. And there's a lot of conversation, even in the design and marketing space, about it. And my favorite definition of a brand is from Marty Neumeier, who wrote a book about branding. And he says a brand is a person's gut feeling about a product, service, or company. It's a gut feeling because we're all emotional, intuitive human beings, despite our best efforts to be logical. I think we've experienced that in any buying process we've been a part of. But it's also a person's gut feeling because at the end of the day, the brand is defined by individuals, not companies, not markets. So we can't control our brand, which I think is a super important distinction because, a brand is not what you say it is, it's what they say it is. So the thing I always get onto for especially new business owners is you already have a brand. You already have this perception of your business that exists in the market. And all the things we do with verbal identity, visual identity, strategy are just efforts to direct that perception and to, more authentically represent who you are.
That's such a well articulated statement as far as what a brand is. And it plays right into, I don't know if you've read Influence is Your Superpower,
I
but
haven't.
they talk about, so they call it the gator brain and the judge. So the gator brain is basically that quick hook. So your initial thought, what is this? What is this brand? And then the judge is the more rational thought. So you can't get to the judge, who's the real decision maker, until you get through the gator. So
I
it
love that.
plays very well directly into that. But it's true. Like those are the subconscious decisions we're making. Am I going to investigate this further? Yes or no? If it's no, nothing else matters. If it's yes, now I can get to the rational stuff as far as what your messaging sounds like. So I love that. I want to take a little step back. I want to kind
Okay.
of give a little bit of a background before you dive into some more heavy hitter stuff. But basically, talk to me a little bit about why you got into branding. So what attracted you to the idea of helping businesses get their messages out there really in a more powerful way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it started because I went to school for graphic design in my undergrad, and I went into graphic design in the fine arts department because I was always a really artistic kid. Um, my entire family are engineers and CPAs and athletes, so I would show up, courtside at a basketball game, and I'd be doodling and creating weird art. And so, I decided, okay, let's go into graphic design because this is the way that I'll make money with my art. And in that program, I would spend, 4 hours in these studio classes just drawing, apples and pears and then hanging it on the wall and having hours of critiques. And I absolutely hated it. So it wasn't until I discovered there's an advertising track at my university where we got to work on campaigns and creatively problem solve. So we got a brief and we said, okay, here's the problem that this business is facing. Go find a creative solution and enact it and present it to people. And that's where I really found my sweet spot. I jumped ship. I was almost completely done with my fine arts major. And I went straight to advertising and said, okay, let's do this. And then from there, I just really fell in love with the process of getting excited about somebody's vision for their business and saying, how can we translate that visually? And really seeing, the look on a business owner's face or that excitement when this is what was in my brain and you pulled it out and brought it to life. It's the best feeling.
It's an art. It really is an art. So the fact that you started with art is, a beautiful metaphor to pull it all together. Our developer, the guy who does our tech stuff, the software, Greg, I'll call him a wizard because it's the same concept. He pulls out, this is what I want, and he'll
Yep.
pull that direct thing. And you guys did the same thing with the SDE rebrand. Here's what I want. Here's 1,000 word vomit. Go put it together, and it comes together beautifully. So, very well articulated there. Also, now to kind of dig in a little further, was it always like, were you always drawn? I know you said you had the background, your family growing up a bunch of athletes. Was it always the fitness industry from the start? Did something happen along the way that made you pivot?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it has always been the fitness industry from the start. For a while in college, a lot of my projects that I would make up would be impact driven. So they'd be a lot of nonprofits,
Mhm.
trying to convey visually, okay, how are we going to take these heavy concepts and raise awareness and get donations? And that felt very fulfilling. But my first job, I somehow got hired at the Department of Sport and Rec and Wellness at my university, my freshman year of college in the marketing department. So people would come to me from outdoor rec, from health and fitness, from the gym, and say, here's our events, create posters and signage and graphics and go hang it up. And so I had that job all through college. And I became friends with all the exercise science kids. I personally was interested in fitness and the outdoors. So we would meal prep weird things and eat chicken and rice and drink Monster Energy because this was 2016 and bodybuilding
Mhm.
was at its peak.
Yep.
And then go work out in the gym and come back and design. And I started doing logos and websites really cheaply or exchanging like, hey, can you show me how to Olympic lift in exchange for a logo and a website? And that's kind of how I do things in college. And there was one particular personal trainer who got picked up by bodybuilding.com. And this was peak bodybuilding.com era. So when she got picked up, she exploded and we launched her website and her logo. And I just got so many referrals from that work specifically. So I created a website, I created a business email, and just started freelancing on the side. And from there, during college, I realized I was making right about what my peers were making at junior positions straight out of college. And so I decided to run with it. And here we are. I've got a small team. And, the fitness industry is my bread and butter. And I think it's important, not every designer specializes in one industry. I love specializing in an industry that I'm personally interested in because it's nice working with people that, number one, I care about their businesses and what they're doing. I get really excited about it. And number two, when you reference things like a niche CrossFit brand that you might say, I really like the way that they're marketing, typically I'm already aware of it and I'm equally excited. And so it's a fun perspective to bring into things and say, okay, how can we give you a brand identity or a website presence, that doesn't look like, red and black with a barbell? Let's do something different.
Yeah, how do we stand out in this very saturated area, but it's still booming. So yeah, it's funny how things kind of fall into line the way that they're supposed to be. Just that one little thing that turns into the next, turns into the next. That's, same story. That's the evolution happening almost by accident. And this is just something
Yeah,
where the right thing happened at the right time. Bodybuilding.com in its prime was the fitness Facebook. That
it
was
was.
everybody
It
was on
really
it.
was.
I don't know what happened. It tanked. Or I don't know if it tanked, but totally pivoted. It's not really a thing. Was it body space? What do they call it? The profile
The
portion.
the forum. I remember
Yeah.
going to the forums and researching supplements. Is this worth my time? And then having 50. It was like a Reddit for fitness. That's what it
They
felt
had that,
like.
but they had profiles, they had goals, it was built out really well. And then all of us, like one day, nobody's using it anymore, or nobody's, referring back to
It's a
it.
classic not adapting with the times. I think
Yeah.
fitness grew exponentially through social media, and all of a sudden we had other methodologies of fitness that, hey, maybe training for a physique competition isn't great for everyday health. And I
Yeah.
think once that conversation took over, bodybuilding.com didn't really keep up.
That's fair. That's fair. Because they had the audience, they had the features, they had, the supplement store built right in. So everyone's
Yeah.
already there, and then they're selling their top 50. That was a list I checked every single month. What am I getting this month? And then, man, talk about a missed opportunity.
Absolutely.
So I know we kind of touched on it in the beginning as far as some things people not necessarily a mistake yet, but not having the clarification of exactly what they
Mhm.
do. So what is the most common branding mistake you see, with more established coaches you work with?
For established coaches, I think I have a lot of thoughts here because that's kind of my bread and butter, who I love working with. But first, I want to be complimentary because building a self-funded business in a highly saturated industry like fitness and wellness is incredibly difficult. You have to be incredibly creative and flexible. And so what I find, is often you've taught yourself, business development, marketing strategy, web design, all the basics so that you can grow your business to a certain point. So you have a white knuckle grip on your business because you've been the one to drive the ship and you know it works. And then sometimes you try to even outsource, but you might hire cheap work. You might hire the wrong person or the right person at the wrong time. And that might tank your business a little bit. And so then you grab on even tighter. So I think the main problems for established coaches in particular are just you wait way too long to outsource branding, web, some of these, things that you can do yourself for a bit, but that can really take you to the next level. And then, two, when you outsource, you might hire cheaply and just keep yourself as the most knowledgeable person in your business, which I think is such a common mistake that we all make as entrepreneurs. Alex Hermosi talks about this with his own business. He would hire on salespeople who didn't know as much as he did, and then get really frustrated when they wouldn't perform, at or above his own ability. And so I think the same thing applies when you're hiring out, for certain core pieces of your business. Just trusting others and saying, okay, how do I make sure that I find the right person and communicate my vision really clearly? So it's a really uniquely difficult space to exist in as a business owner because you're self-funded. You don't have VC firms just handing you money and saying, hey, go hire, you've proven your concept, go hire branding, go get a website done. You kind of have to do that on the fly. So I think the most important thing to know as a business owner is, for lack of a better analogy, like where to point the gun and when to pull the trigger. And so I think those two things tend to be the most common mistake I see. And even in hiring a professional, keeping that white knuckle grip, because of course, this is your baby. You're terrified that it's going to be misrepresented.
No doubt. And I can definitely speak from experience. One psychological aspect to that is that, for those who have had success, so if they're more established, they've seen some level of success, knowing that you got there specifically on everything you have implemented on your own. So first of all, you have this reinforced notion that I got us here. I need to continue to build us and grow us, which is not scalable at any point when you get to that level. But also it's like almost riding the high horse where, hey, I did this myself. I can continue to do this myself. But when we started our initial onboarding forms with you guys, I think I wrote in there, we've been doing this past, at this point, 18 months. I call them billion-dollar audits. So essentially, if what we are doing doesn't look like or doesn't come across or isn't delivered like a billion-dollar business would do it, like if they a commercial, an ad, some type of content within the app or the specific product service itself. If a billion-dollar business wouldn't put that out, we're not going to put that out anymore either. So we were using initially, what was our first website? I don't even know what we started with, but then before we jumped in with you guys, we just used one of your templates. Like, oh, this looks really
Yeah.
good. We can plug and play. And we did. But then I go back and I look at it 2 months later and I'm like, okay, well, would a billion-dollar business have this website? No. Okay, well, it's time to update that. How are we posting? How does that social content look like? Going back to the branding stuff with you guys, as far as not only tone but actual the visuals, the types, the colors, having those things all come together. The what do you guys call the symbols? Not the logo, but like the little things you put in there.
Yeah, it's like iconography, like icons you
Iconography
use to represent your different services or
and the pathways and
topics.
stuff, the dots and stuff you
Yeah,
created. Okay, yes. So
like
little things like that.
patterns.
Yes,
Hmm.
yes. So little things like that that we're obviously not thinking of, but when you see it over the course of your last 50 posts, there is a difference between an amateur and a high-end company. So those are the things. That's what I call the billion-dollar audit. This is where we want to go. We have huge visions for both of our companies. We have to do the little things to that level before the big things get to that level.
That's such a good distinction too, because I think it's important to differentiate, even for smaller coaches. you don't necessarily need to go out and spend, $50,000 on branding and a website design at your current stage. I think the important thing to think about your business as a real business, and how would, if you were taking this to Shark Tank and asking for funding, like how would you build your business if you did have that funding, and how can you backtrack from there? Because I do think a lot of the newer business owners that we work with come to us just saying like, I want my stuff to look good and I want to be confident in it, which is a great thing. You need to feel confident that you look like the professional that you are. But really, let's think about this from a business perspective. What's the most important thing to be investing in right now in your business? And are you looking at this and running this like a billion-dollar business owner would?
And you led that perfectly. So my follow-up was going to be for the newer guys. What are the mistakes they're
Yeah.
making? And this can be, I know at the higher level, having had some success, you want to be outsourcing, making sure professionals are handling this. That's the billion-dollar audit. But from square one, whether it's the biggest mistake you want to point out or the biggest piece of advice for someone to run with, like initially doing this on your own, what do you see mistake-wise, or what would you recommend they start with when it comes to branding?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I feel like so many of my bread and butter clients and people who I work with tend to fall into this space before they scale. And I think just like established coaches really struggle with outsourcing and letting go of that white knuckle grip they have on their business. Often I find newer business owners are so laser focused on, is my logo right? Am I showing up with the right colors? Am I showing up with the right fonts? That we're so focused on the visuals and looking like the other guys in the industry and like the major players that we completely disregard the basics. Do I have a solid offer structure? Do I understand my market position? Do I understand, my competitors and how I am unique to them? Do I know my target market, my target audience deeply? And do I have like a 5-year plan, a 1-year plan to scale? And what should I focus on now? And so I think it's great. We've created like a brand in a day package specifically for these newer business owners. Like, let's give you some visuals so that you're confident. But with that package, I ran a workshop yesterday on brand messaging and strategy for those people, just saying like, hey, I'm so glad you have killer visuals now. Start from square one over here. Nail this first. You're going to scale so much faster than getting the perfect logo, because that's not necessarily going to move the needle forward on its own.
No, it's exciting. It's fun. It's flashy. It's, this is my thing. It looks awesome on a hat and on a sweatshirt. And maybe that does give them the confidence to then go run back to those other areas and make sure they have their one liner and their little elevator pitch and they're, circulating the right things. But it feels like that's the first thing. I can't have a business. I'm not legitimate until I have X, Y, and Z. And then I can focus on all the little things. But it's funny you even mentioned, they want these first. Now you go back and do these other things. But I think that worked out really well with the brand in a day you guys started launching recently. And, let's give you these fun things, it's much smaller budget, obviously, than a full rebuild. And again, hopefully that gives them the confidence to kind of take things and run.
And I think it's similar to if you're just getting into fitness or if you're working with clients who are beginners, you tend to get trapped in this. Okay, we're going to research and buy things. We're going to buy the right gear. We're going to buy the right supplements, because that's a lot more shiny and fun than actually getting in the gym and doing the consistent, boring work that it takes to get stronger and healthier. And I think it's the exact same thing with your business. It's great. Like, if you want to buy supplements, if you want to get the right gear, that can go a long way. Make sure you have the right shoes to lift in. But at the same time, make sure you're also doing the basics.
Yep, that's the smallest piece of the pyramid, no doubt. So you could, change your whole life doing nothing but body weight stuff and some cardio and eating right. You don't have to buy a damn thing. But no,
Yes,
you're right. Again. Sometimes that is what they need, though. They want the new outfit. They want the new water bottle. And then again, you get the water bottle or you get your logo and you're motivated because you have the confidence to go do the rest. Which it's funny how we work
absolutely.
psychologically.
Yeah.
So effective branding really is this magical balance of recognizable fonts, color palettes, logos, tone of voice, specific messaging. But does a business need to actually master every single one of these in order to be successful? Or, if that is the case and there's different levels to it, what happens if one or two of these miss or they're inconsistent within their branding and within their messaging? What do you see there?
This is such a good question. And the way that I want to answer this is to rank everything and say, okay, well, logo is last and we're going to put brand strategy first. And The reality is it's much more nuanced than that. And it goes back to, okay, think about if you were to launch a billion-dollar company and you're trying to get funding for it. What happens as soon as you prove your concept? The VCs are saying, hey, go work with this agency, go get a full brand strategy, full brand identity, get your website created so that we can grow this. So I think it is all equally important for success. The problem is you don't have, $1 million to go fund all of these projects. So I think the important thing, like let's take Nike, for example, over the years. If you look at their ad campaigns from like the 90s to now, you'll see wildly different colors, different fonts, even photography styles, and even messaging. They've changed their messaging over the years and their campaigns. But if you were to look at their entire library of work, you see it's just so unapologetically Nike. It all feels consistent. And why? Because they're using different photography, different colors, different fonts, different messaging. And I think it boils down to the core of brand strategy. And I'd rank that as the most important thing to get right, even if all of the other things shift, because it's so foundational. So I'll kind of go through like 3 main points that you should really know that I think are essential for business success. And this is what Nike knows, and why I think they're so successful, and businesses just like it. The first thing to know is who you are as a business owner, what your core mission, vision, values are, why you do what you do. Like, write that shit down. It shouldn't just live in your head. To be able to effectively communicate it, you need to have this written out on paper. And the act of forcing yourself to write these things down will force you to make them concrete and develop sentences to communicate them to other people. And I think a great example of this too is the brand Patagonia. The founder, Yvon Chouinard, built his business on the back of his love of rock climbing. He started selling gear out of the back of his car to fund, just being able to climb. But then he quickly realized that the gear that he was using was actually harming the rock walls that he was climbing on. And so he established a business to create gear that does no harm. So the entire Patagonia strategy, from the products that they develop to the campaigns they run to the foundations that they donate to, came from this idea of do no harm, to the point where in 2022, he actually stepped down, sold his shares, and all the profit that he would get, he's giving back to environmental conservation. And like, that is a strong brand that truly knows itself. So starting there, I think, is super important. The second thing that's equally important, know who you serve, who you're marketing to, not just like, 25 to 38-year-old women who want to lose weight in the city of New Jersey, in the state of New Jersey. I don't know. Like, you need to know what their life story looks like, what their values are, how they self-identify before working with you, after working with you, what their hopes and dreams are for the future. And there's some advertising campaigns that came out from a running brand, and I can't remember which brand, but they had this kind of message of audience of one, or like beat your own time, essentially, with all of their photography and all of their messaging. And it really, like, you can tell they truly know the recreational runners that they're marketing to really just care. They're not trying to beat anybody else in the race. They're trying to beat their own personal time. And that's what you can do when you truly understand your audience. It goes beyond just marketing to their core desires, but like, you understand what is going to be inspiring to them, which I think is really cool. And then the
Something
third,
to belong to.
Yeah, something to belong to, and that's what creates a really cool brand that people can like. It has longevity. You've got a community. And so the third thing I would focus on too is your position in the market. A lot of clients that I work with say, I don't care about my competitors. Nobody really does exactly what I do. All of my competitors are friends, which might be true. You might be friends with a lot of industry peers, but the truth is you should care about your competitors. And often they're not just who you're aware of on Instagram. If you are battling for somebody's free time or free dollars to invest in fitness coaching, your main competitor might be Netflix or MyFitnessPal, because they think that's what they need, to get their nutrition on track. So truly understanding like your unique position in such a saturated landscape will help you make decisions about how you market. And all of these things together, who you are, who you serve, and your position in the market, will also educate how you show up with your colors and your fonts, your messaging and your marketing style, that you can evolve over time so your brand has longevity.
Absolutely. So right to that point, longevity, how common would you say it is to see great products and services fail because something along that line is off?
This is such a great question. And I think it's incredibly common to see great businesses fail because of poor branding. Again, not just visual styles, but messaging and marketing materials. I think we're not as aware of it because often we don't see these startups that really just tank because they didn't have a clear, brand position. But I think a good example of this is some of the marketing campaigns that we've seen giant companies do that have absolutely flopped. Like think about Pepsi when they released their Kendall Jenner Pepsi ad. And I don't know if you're aware of this ad, but it was Kendall
Mm,
Jenner who essentially there was this like protest that was going on. This was back in 2020, when brands were hopping on board to social justice and
yep.
equality, which is a great thing to hop on board with. But what Pepsi did was took like a public figure or a celebrity and she handed a police officer a Pepsi, if I'm remembering this correctly. And then everyone was happy. The protest dissolved. Everyone was unified, which is just a ridiculous message to send across. Like
Yeah.
our drink can solve these really complex issues. And it's just a very clear lack of reading the room. And Coca-Cola jumped into this and did this really well, in that they just showed their Coca-Cola cans of Coke on a dinner table in like different people's like living rooms, dining rooms, people sharing it with like all kinds of ethnic backgrounds and social statuses. They were all sharing this one thing that really did unify everyone and bring them together, which is simply we all like Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And they didn't try to make themselves more important than they were. And it was a really touching message. So I think that's a really good example of not really understanding how to use your brand position, understanding who you are in the market, why you're important to your customers. And that's how I think you see a lot of these like giant marketing campaigns really fall flat.
Yeah, definitely reading the room. And, Donald Miller talks about it in Building a Story Brand, but it seems like Pepsi positioned themselves as the hero versus the guide, whereas Coke
100%.
Coke typically, or they just kind of sat in the background and said, this is just one thing, in that instance where our heroes can kind of come together on. Um, you know, it's not a super, it's not a magic pill. It's not a whatever we want to call Pepsi in that regard. So there was no real heartwarming message to go with that campaign
Yeah.
versus Coke deciding, hey, we all have similarities that maybe we're not noticing, but then behind the scenes, here's one thing symbolizing that. So great analogy, great way to pull that through. Now, on the flip side, mediocre products and services. How often do we see, and I know it's kind of tough on the first side because those things may have not have come to fruition, but how often do we see mediocre things, mediocre services, mediocre products last a long time and even thrive and explode because they are so good at this stuff?
That's a great question. I think this is a really fun topic to cover now because we see a lot of these really trendy products getting so mainstream and breaking into these wildly saturated markets. Like if we think that the fitness landscape is saturated, the sparkling water landscape is even more saturated and has a very low like profit margin, to my understanding. And so a great example of a brand that has really done well is Liquid Death, which I think we've probably seen if you're following any kind of marketing speak on Instagram, you've probably seen Liquid Death case studies come through. But it's such a great example of they said, hey, we just make sparkling water. There's nothing special about it, but let's do it in a way that you want to have this can in your hand at a bar. Like I'm not drinking a beer, I'm drinking a Liquid Death, and that has some clout behind it. And to be able to shift this really break into a trendy industry and kind of shift the perception of drinking a non-alcoholic beverage. And this was before mocktails and non-alcoholic beverages really got popular too. You're seeing it all over music festivals. And they really broke into the landscape because they had weird and kind of, almost off-putting messaging and graphics that felt a little hardcore, and people loved to grab onto that as a status symbol. And I think that's an important lesson within branding. I always say the reason why people buy from us has changed over the years. As the market has gotten more saturated. Back in the 1900s, we were just marketing like, hey, this is a good product. It has everything you need, buy it. And then you see like Mad Men era, the 1950s, the 60s, were marketing experience. Like if you drive this car, all of your friends will think you're really cool and whatever. And then when we get into the like 2000s, you see all of a sudden it becomes about identity. We have stickers on our water bottles and on our laptops that kind of signal to other people, I'm this type of person. And now we buy from brands that say, hey, like, I'm this type of person because I associate myself with this brand. And Donald Miller also says, like, people buy into your brand because they want you to participate in their transformation. And I think that's especially true within the fitness and wellness industry, is people are really coming to you with their hopes and their dreams and saying, I think I can achieve this person. This is the person I see myself as, and I see you as the way to get there, which is a really powerful space to exist in.
No doubt. And that water example is probably the perfect answer to that, because you're talking about water with bubbles in it, but the company is literally built around branding. There's no difference. It's the same water, it's the same bubbles, literally built entirely and thriving because of their messaging and their overall branding value. Now, going back to, the guide philosophy, I think, and tell me what your thoughts are on this shift, but since COVID, I mean, I would say prior to COVID, virtual convenience, a lot of those things were kind of put up on a pedestal. Post COVID, it really feels like there's been a shift back to wanting that community, wanting to be more people. You talk about the stickers and the water bottle, wanting to be a part of that club. Have you seen that? Have you noticed, has that affected brand messaging at all in any of the projects you guys have taken on?
I think it's affected brand messaging, absolutely. And the way people do business has really shifted because of the post-pandemic. We have this, huge desire for community, like you said. And I also think it's influenced because of AI. All of a sudden, we have tools at our fingertips to deliver us programming and even to have a conversation with. Like Whoop's AI technically can give you a decent program, according to some. And so now I think as a business owner, you kind of live in the space where we want to connect with another individual. We want to have a community. And you're now an expert in more than just, I can deliver a program on a spreadsheet that's going to work for you, but I can understand the nuances of your life and I can shift things to be a little bit more personalized. So I think because of how personalized things are going in the space, branding has become even more important. There is an era back in, around the pandemic era when tools like Canva and AI generated, like tools for copywriting using ChatGPT, all those things were taking over. But I think now we're starting to see the value in things that are hand done, really intentional. And so it's been fun to see that shift. We're no longer pixel pushers, I would call us, and just, hey, let's deliver you some graphics, because you can get that from Canva and from AI tools. And now it's saying, hey, let's back up, let's create some humanness within your brand, and let's create a strategy that brings people into your overall story.
It's this constant, ebb and flow of zigging and zagging when everything goes this way. And then, you hit this point in the pendulum, you start swinging back the other way. And that's how you stand out, I think, throughout all this. So it makes a ton of sense. Last question I have, and we can take any directions you want after this, but, and you don't have to name names, but tell us about a case study you're most proud of and how you saw that brand grow or change after working with them.
I'll name names. I don't think these clients would mind. So I think I have two clients that I want to highlight. One of them is, if you're familiar with Hard House Nutrition, Sarah Tierney, who runs Hard House Nutrition, she started her business and I think even started her social media back in 2020, which wasn't that long ago. And started the Hard House brand, I think in 2021, which is when she reached out to us. And so she is the prime example of just knowing where to point the gun and when to pull the trigger, because she has scaled a really incredible brand in a short amount of time, and a brand that is deeply authentic. It's rooted in exactly the type of business she wants to run. And so it's been fun partnering with her, because when she initially reached out for branding, it was very much, hey, here's my vision. Here's where I want to take things. I trust you guys, do your thing. Similar to working with you and Alessandra on SD Evolution, it was very much, hey, I trust you guys. Like, here's our vision, go take it and see what happens. And it was same thing that happened with us working together was first round of the brand that we sent over. For the most part, it's like, hey, this is a win. Here's a few edits and we're good to go. And the way that she handles every other branding project since as she scaled up, she said, hey, I'm going to come back. Let's do some brand strategy together. I think I really need to work on my messaging. So we tackled that last year. And then she came back and said, hey, I'm launching a university side of the house. I need a sub brand for this. And so we did a bunch of research on, e-learning brands and education and said, okay, here's what works in marketing. We see what works with Peloton and Masterclass and some of these other brands. But when somebody's in your platform, there are certain standards of what works really well and is conducive to e-learning. So we did a bunch of research on, hey, you're dark mode with all of your marketing. We go light mode for your e-learning platform once clients are in. So we got to get really granular with how her brand was applied. And that was super fun to kind of marry some of that strategy and user experience science, with the creative. So I think that's one of my favorite clients to spotlight. And then another one is one of my best friends who I met in college. She started personal training at the same time that I started freelancing. And, that's Alyssa Olenek, otherwise known as Dockless Fitness. And she, as her business scaled and grew, my skill set scaled and grew. And so we were able to work alongside each other, which was such a unique and cool experience. So at this point, we've had 3 iterations of her brand and 3 iterations of her website, which typically you don't need to change things that much. But like most people who exist in the online space, sometimes your brand and your business is evolving rapidly, just like hers did. So as she got her PhD, we decided to break apart her training program app and her academic personal brand so that she could speak and give TED Talks and speak at conferences. And she had a clean and polished, more academic feel to that side of the house. And then her, workout app had the same fun feeling that a lot of people gravitated onto. And so at the last project, we really dove into website strategy and got a ton of data about how are people using her website and how can we make it better? How can we make that user journey better? So we got to dig really deep into the user journey, similar to what we did with SD Evolution, saying, what are people paying attention to? Looks like a lot of people aren't watching the videos. How can we make sure they watch the videos, but they also are able to easily read the same content right next to it? And so those kinds of projects where we can really dig into the weeds and pull out some research and apply it in a creative way, I think are my favorite.
Yeah, no, it's when you can kind of create that engaging journey and you actually get to that level. So all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, high level, successful, what are the things these guys need to be doing? It seems like they fully encapsulated that all the way down to the point where, hey, there's a slight shift in the way that I want to talk about certain things. Let's go through a whole research project just to identify the right way to do that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, again, it comes back to how would a large business owner look at this problem and tackle this problem? And that's why I created some of those offerings of like audits and strategy, because that's what the larger agencies are doing with their clients. And I so strongly believe that everyone in the fitness industry and all these coaches need to be looking at their business the same way. And how can we deliver that same level of service, but maybe at various offer structures and price points, so it is a little more attainable.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's something that, we're learning and adapting as we go throughout this and figure out, even at this level, a decade into it and obviously doing pretty well. How do we get a little bit better? And even times like this, so a lot of economic uncertainty and a lot of people putting the brakes on this. Projects are, let's hold up until things get better.
Yeah.
I think Ed Milet calls that separation season. So really doubling down and making sure that you're putting everything you can, even if it's not financially, maybe you literally don't have the
Mm-hmm.
funds to put forth into this next project. Well, can you double down on your creativity? Can you double down on the effort you're putting into this? Can you double down on additional services you can provide that don't cost additional capital to kind of jumpstart? So I think this is a really exciting time. We have just about every dollar we have made that we're not paying our team, we have invested into the business over this past year. And that is with
Yep.
weird market times across all, not even just fitness, across the board. People are talking
Yes.
about this as it's a trust recession. I think a lot of it has to do with the political uncertainty, economic uncertainty, where things are going there with the market itself. But a lot of it in regards to trust specifically is people are getting really tired of being sold the bill of goods. And once you get that sale, it's on to the next one. You're just a number, and there's no follow up. There's no real relationship. There's no connection there.
Mhm.
That has been a huge, huge pain point for a lot of people. And it makes sense that now they're like, okay, well, now I'm not just taking your word on this cool Instagram reel or this ad that I just saw that I was drawn to. I'm gonna linger for a while. And if I'm not getting value, if I'm not seeing progress before I make that purchase, then forget about it. So having that patience, having that understanding, that awareness of what's happening around you, and then realizing right now during these times of uncertainty, if you are doubling down in some capacity, whatever capacity you have available to you, it's going to set you apart once things do springboard again, which they always will. It's all cyclical.
That's such a good point. I'm in the exact same boat as far as every dime I'm making, it's being thrown right back into the business. And it's not a fun place to be as the market is a little more precarious. But it's also a cool position to be in because you can take a look at things and say, okay, if I were to create anything, how would I do things differently? We're no longer just churning out clients. How are we going to tackle these problems differently? And I think as business owners, if you're going back in this season of lower clientele because maybe discretionary spending people are hanging on to, then you can say, okay, fortunately, there's so many free resources out there. With this additional time, maybe I'm going to, teach myself a little bit more about brand strategy or focusing deeper on the messaging that I'm putting out. And let's get more intentional with it, and DIYing it for a bit, until the market picks back up. And I also think it is the political climate. We've also seen if the way people buy dramatically change post COVID. I think everyone went online with their business, and
Mhm.
not all online businesses are ethical. And so I think a lot of people got taken advantage of, and now we are not trusting at all with just seeing. The buying process is a lot longer when we see things online. And I think that's what makes showing up authentically so important. And hey, I care about what's best for you. And you can market from a position of what's the tactic I can use to get this client in the door, but how do I speak to this deeper need that they might have if they're my ideal client, so they don't go off and work with this other person or continue with the same lifestyle that is harming them. How can I say the right things to them so that they see this is a great solution?
1000%. And it's really, we talk about nurturing our audience all the time. So one of the biggest foundations of our academy and, mentoring the other coaches is, how are you showing up in a way that delivers value to this person, assuming they're never ever going to work with you? So if
Yep.
they never saw another piece of content, they never had another download, what can you give them that they can take and change their lives? And if you put that out there with the intention that this person may never spend a dime with you, and you create that kind of thing, what happens is like, wow, I didn't spend anything. They gave me this, these amazing things happen. What would happen if I did sign up for this low cost app, or if I do go all in with the premium option as far as coaching? So for the coaches out there listening, what type of lead magnets are you putting out there? So during this time, this is something you can go create on Canva. Once you get your brand strategy down, once you get your messaging down,
100%.
go build that out. Use this time to nurture an audience, build your email list. People are doing SMS now, so building out the text list, getting kind of ahead of that, and just
Yeah.
doing it with the power of like, hey, if there's one thing I can give you, it's this. And it shouldn't be a billion page book, but 5, 10 pages max, or a quick checklist with some context to it. You build that out, and then you let that do its thing. And then when things do pick up again, back to that springboard, it's absolutely going to happen. So all of this stuff tying together like that.
That's the cool thing too about the industry that you specifically work within. It's service, and you deeply care about your clients, and you care about what you're doing, and you're passionate that you are making change. And so approaching things through that lens, ironically, you end up getting more clients and making more money, and your business is more successful when you're actually giving and serving, instead of getting caught up in whatever Instagram strategy or marketing tactic is supposed to get clients in the door. Just how do you serve and give people everything that you can, and then they come through the door. And business feels a lot better when you approach it that way too.
Yeah, you're doing things for the right reason. It's not how can I make a money, it's how can I help you. When
Yeah.
that's the core of what you're doing. How can I help this person? How can I help this group of people who has this problem? So That's where we're at, guys. Tatum, anything else that you want to make sure everybody knows? Anything else you want to throw in there? I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, I mean, on the note of free stuff, we're running website audits for free. It's like a personalized session. It's 20 minutes. And that can be a super great thing to invest in if you're like, hey, I don't have anything to invest in. I don't think it's the right time for my brand. These are super fun where we can dig into your website. We can talk about, hey, are you positioning yourself as the hero, or can you speak to the client a little bit better? We even dig into the weeds about what's your goal with SEO and what are some things that you can do right now to help you get there. So that's a free tool that's on our website, brandtcreativeco.com, or brandtcreative.co. And
It'll be
so,
linked in the show notes. We'll throw it
yeah,
all in there.
yeah, thank you. And then aside from that, there is no one size fits all strategy for branding. All of these are tools to shape the perception that your audience has about you. So have fun with it. It's not, you don't have to follow a certain framework, just focus on the things to get that 1% better and show up more authentically.
I love that. I love that. 1% every single day, and it leads to amazing things over time. Where can they find you, Tatum?
You can find me at brandtcreative.co on Instagram. Same URL for the website. And then I'm also at Tatum Brandt, Brandt on Instagram, where I should be sharing more educational content, more behind the scenes. So if you like design or you want to see some sketches, that's where you can find me.
I love it. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. We will catch you in the next one.